Hello and welcome to the trade setup. In this video we are looking at USA Rare Earth. This was a stock analysis request from one of the followers, and I wanted to let you know that anyone can make these requests and I will most likely cover them, especially if there is an actionable trade setup to follow. And in the case of this chart, there isn't too much of a potential trade setup, at least not on the long side, at least not yet, because in this structure to the upside that has been forming, we only have patterns that are formed of a three-wave move, yeah? Initially in this movement to the upside we have an ABC structure, and then in the next move to the upside we also have an ABC structure. Now, we may be able to consider this movement to the downside in this overall downtrend a potential five-wave move to the downside, which is a very, very serious threat, but right now we haven't gotten to the area of resistance relevant to that interpretation. Now, with that said, we can track in the most bullish interpretation a potential five-wave move to the upside in a leading diagonal, since there is no five-wave pattern, but I cannot really consider this to be the third wave top, because then in this movement to the downside we would have retraced far beyond the 61.8% retracement. In fact, we have touched here perfectly the 78.6% retracement, which is way below the area of support expected to be acceptable for a wave 4 correction. And in this case, it can still work out for a third wave to the upside, but I would really only be tracking that as part of an overall ABC structure instead, where, sure, we would expect still further continuation higher, even within a five-wave move to the upside, but I wouldn't necessarily consider the third wave complete, that's all. Now, the thing is, in this smaller time frame area, we are under the threat that this movement to the downside could in fact be a five-wave move itself, where in the case of a possible WXY structure, this pattern to the upside would be complete and we wouldn't need any additional highs before heading into into possibly new all-time lows. And in that case, we need to be very much aware of this interpretation. 1, 2, 3, 4th, and the 5th is even possible in such a scenario, where we would actually have quite a significant resistance area here at levels between the $19.2 all the way up to the $33 level at a 78.6% retracement. So far, we haven't gotten into this area of resistance. And at this point, if we do, I may be able to consider an initial five-wave move to the upside here in the smaller time frame anyway, which should allow us, at least in the short time frame, even if we aren't to follow in the white interpretation in this entire wave C to the upside, it should allow us to look at least for a three-wave move correction to the downside and then another five-wave move to the upside. There is significant potential within this smaller time frame. However, keep the entire context in mind. If you are looking for a long side position, you are entering as you would expect a push into a resistance area where there is a significant risk that this overall pattern would succeed in the yellow interpretation. Now, with that said, we have not yet gotten here into the area of resistance in the yellow scenario, and I am not necessarily looking for a trade setup in this area right now, especially not on the long side, because we only have a three-wave move to the upside. This could be considered a 1, 2, 3, 4th, and the 5th that could come, but we don't have the 4th and the 5th to look for a potential wave 2 correction, which would be a more interesting area for a potential position. Now, with that said, in this small time frame movement to the upside which has occurred so far, we may have the possibility of tracking even an impulse, but it is probably one much less likely scenario for me. It would actually rely on having a series of 1, 2 setups in this area instead, and have here a third, have a fourth, and then a series of 4 or 5 patterns to complete this entire structure. But the positive side is that in both interpretations, we would be looking for a very similar area of support. We would be looking for a correction in a wave 4, and in the idea of an impulse, we can allow this retracement to go at the levels between the $16.7 all the way down to the $15.1 level. And if we are to look for a possible diagonal structure, we should even allow here the 61.8% retracement, which allows a slightly deeper retracement within this wave 4 into the levels all the way down to the $14.5 instead. Now, with that said, I do slightly prefer the interpretation of a diagonal structure forming within this area. Although I'm not saying this structure cannot fail, it could easily work out as an ABC structure itself and have a larger ABC movement within this wave 2 in yellow. Yeah, just to point that out, it is not impossible to fail to hold this area of support, but if we do, yeah, it is very, very likely not going to provide us with a reliable trade setup in any of the near-term patterns that we should expect within this area. Yeah, if we form then a larger 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe then we can look for a potential 1, 2 setup that could be somewhat reliable, but not in any of the short-term areas should we expect such a pattern if we fail to build this initial 5-wave move to the upside. So this chart does actually, or we require of this chart to build quite specific movements, quite specific structures to actually be considered for a potential trade setup. But yeah, unless it does that, it or the Elliott wave theory would suggest to us that we should probably stay away, we should probably be on the safe side and choose more reliable structures to take positions within. Yeah, at least this is the case for the long side, because again, on the short side, we may already have a larger initial 5-wave move to the downside. Yeah, there is even more than one ways for me to actually track this as a full 5-wave structure. And there is potential for a 1-2 setup in this area. Or who knows, maybe just an AB setup for a wave C to the downside. But the idea is this yellow interpretation expects an additional 5-wave move to the downside after this correction in the wave 2 or in the wave B is complete within this area of resistance in yellow. Now, with that said, if we fail to hold here the small time frame area of support and then fail to hold here even the 78.6% retracement, yeah, I would actually assume we might have formed an early top within this correction and look for direct continuation lower with an even higher likelihood. Now, I don't necessarily have a preference in actually, or in that scenario playing out. I am favoring still at least a push into the area of resistance, if nothing more. And so far, within this retracement, we already have a 3-wave move to the downside. If I were to choose, I would prefer that this correction would already be complete. We also had quite a sharp and quick completion of the wave 2 correction as well. And yeah, ideally we have already completed the wave 4, but honestly, doesn't look too much like it just now. But keep in mind, it is on a smaller time frame, and yeah, we need to give it some time to actually build the structure. And here, if we form an additional low, it is not the end of the world. Keep in mind, the actual 38.2% retracement is the ideal target for the wave 4 anyway. Now, with that said, there isn't much else to provide. This is the most relevant area of support, the most relevant level of support. The 61.8% retracement sits at the $14.5, and as long as we hold that, we can still look for a potential wave 5 to the upside, which if we form, we can look for a potential trade setup in this area. And for now, these are the levels, this is the trade setup. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to subscribe and let me know what else you want me to cover, and I'll do my best to do that in the days and weeks ahead. And until then, I hope you have a nice day, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.